December 15, 1944. Saipan Island, Northern Marianas. The concrete bunker shook as another American artillery shell exploded overhead, raining dust and debris onto the 19 Japanese women huddled in the darkness below. For 3 weeks, they had survived on rainwater collected in helmets and the last remnants of military rations, waiting for death or deliverance. Nurse Yoshiko Tanaka pressed her back against the cold concrete wall, clutching the blood-stained medical bag that had become her only remaining connection to her purpose. At 24, she had served 2 years with the Imperial Army's Medical Corps, first in Manchuria, then across the Pacific Islands as American forces pushed relentlessly westward. The other women around her represented the scattered remnants of Japan's civilian and military presence on Saipan: telegraph operators, administrative clerks, teachers who had volunteered for overseas service, and fellow nurses who had followed the Army's advance with naive patriotism. Senior nurse Kimiko Hayashi, 31 years old and veteran of campaigns in Burma and the Philippines, checked her watch by the light of a dying candle. The bombardment had ceased 40 minutes ago. In the silence that followed, they could hear American voices calling in broken Japanese, "Surrender now. You will be treated according to international law." The women exchanged glances filled with terror and disbelief. Every propaganda film, every military briefing, every newspaper article had prepared them for American barbarity. They had been told that capture meant torture, rape, and execution. Japanese military doctrine demanded death before dishonor. Yet hunger, thirst, and the gradual realization that no Japanese relief was coming had worn down their resolve. Telegraph operator Sachiko Yamamoto, barely 20 years old, began to weep silently. She had joined the Army Communications Corps to support her family back in Tokyo, sending half her pay home each month. Her younger sister's letters had stopped arriving months ago. "I want to see my family again," she whispered. "I want to go home." The decision came not from military calculation, but from simple human exhaustion. Kimiko Hayashi, as the senior officer present, made the choice that would save their lives and forever alter their understanding of their enemy. "We surrender," she announced quietly. "May the Emperor forgive us." They emerged from the bunker into blinding Pacific sunlight, hands raised, expecting bullets. Instead, they found themselves facing a line of American Marines who lowered their weapons and stepped back respectfully. First Lieutenant Robert Chun, a Japanese-American soldier from the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, approached them slowly, his hands visible and empty. "I am Lieutenant Chun," he said in perfect Japanese. "You are now prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention. You will be treated with dignity and respect." Yoshiko stared at him in amazement. A Japanese face speaking perfect Japanese, but wearing an American uniform. The contradictions multiplied as the Americans provided immediate medical attention for their injuries, offered clean water, and assigned them to a temporary holding area that had been prepared with basic amenities. Female American nurses examined them for injuries and administered medications from supplies that seemed unlimited compared to the shortages that had plagued Japanese forces for months. The processing took 3 days. American doctors, including 2 women physicians, conducted thorough medical examinations to ensure the prisoners were healthy enough for transport. They were photographed, fingerprinted, and interviewed by intelligence officers who spoke fluent Japanese and showed detailed knowledge of Japanese military organization. The Americans knew more about Japanese troop movements than the prisoners themselves. But the most shocking revelation came during the interviews. Captain Dorothy Miller, a former social worker from Portland who had been assigned to the Women's Army Corps specifically to handle female prisoners, explained their rights under international law. "You will be transported to the United States where you will be held in proper facilities," she said through Lieutenant Chen's translation. "You may write letters to your families through the International Red Cross. You will receive medical care and adequate food. You will be repatriated to Japan when the war ends." The women listened in stunned silence. This treatment contradicted everything they had been taught about American cruelty. Kimiko Hayashi, whose husband served somewhere in the Pacific with the Imperial Navy, finally found her voice. "You will not execute us." Captain Miller looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Execute you? Why would we do that? You are military personnel who fought for your country. We respect that, even though we fought on opposite sides." The journey to America began aboard the hospital ship USS Repose, a converted luxury liner that had been transformed into a floating medical facility. Instead of being confined to the cargo hold as they expected, the Japanese women were assigned to a section of the ship that had been designated for recovering wounded American personnel who were being evacuated to hospitals in California. Navy nurses, many no older than the prisoners themselves, showed them how to operate the ship's facilities: flush toilets, hot showers, electric lighting that could be controlled with switches on the wall. These were luxuries that most of the women had never experienced, even in peacetime Japan. The contrast with their previous conditions was overwhelming. Hospital corpsman Mary Rodriguez from San Antonio found herself assigned to monitor the Japanese prisoners during the 2-week voyage. In her diary, she recorded her impressions. They seemed so young and frightened. The one they call Tanaka-san speaks some English and tries to translate for the others. She asked me today if we would really kill them when we reached America. When I told her no, that wasn't how Americans did things, she looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. They seemed genuinely amazed that we're feeding them the same food as our own wounded soldiers. The meals aboard ship became daily lessons in American abundance. The prisoners received 3 hot meals each day: eggs, bacon, bread, milk, coffee, meat, vegetables, and fruit. Portions were generous enough that they couldn't finish everything on their plates. Yoshiko watched American sailors scraping leftover food into garbage bins and felt physically ill at the waste. In Japan, such quantities of food would have fed her family for a week. More disturbing still was the casual attitude of the American personnel. They showed no hatred, no desire for revenge, no satisfaction at having captured enemies. Instead, they displayed what seemed like genuine concern for the prisoners' comfort and well-being. When Sachiko Yamamoto became seasick during rough weather, an American nurse spent hours caring for her, bringing medicine and bland foods to settle her stomach. Dr. Sarah Goldman, a Jewish refugee from Vienna who had fled Nazi persecution in 1938 and now served as a civilian consultant to the military on refugee affairs, spent time each day talking with the prisoners. Her presence among the Americans puzzled them deeply. If America was controlled by Jewish conspiracies as Japanese propaganda claimed, why was this woman serving as a minor consultant rather than commanding the ship? In America, Dr. Goldman explained in careful Japanese she had learned from textbooks, people of many backgrounds work together. We believe that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. As the USS Repose approached the California coast, the prisoners gathered on deck to catch their first glimpse of America. The San Francisco Bay stretched before them, filled with more ships than they had ever seen in one place. The city itself blazed with electric lights even in daylight, a display of power consumption that would have been unthinkable in wartime Japan. Yoshiko gripped the ship's rail and watched the approaching shoreline with a mixture of fear and fascination. In 2 weeks, everything she had believed about America and Americans had been challenged. They had not been tortured or starved or humiliated. Instead, they had been treated better than many Japanese soldiers were treated by their own officers. As the ship entered San Francisco Bay, Lieutenant Chun approached the group of prisoners. "Ladies," he said formally, "in a few hours you will set foot on American soil. You will be processed at Angel Island and then transferred to a permanent facility. I want you to understand that your treatment will continue to follow international law. America keeps its promises, even to its enemies." Kimiko Hayashi bowed slightly, a gesture that surprised the American officer. "Lieutenant Chun-san," she said quietly, "we do not understand your country. We were prepared to die as soldiers. Instead, you treat us as guests." Lieutenant Chun considered her words carefully. "In America, we believe that how we treat our enemies reveals who we are as a people. We choose to show mercy because we are strong enough to do so." The ship's engine slowed as they approached the dock. Yoshiko could see American civilians going about their daily business on the waterfront. Men in suits, women in dresses, children playing, cars moving freely along paved roads. This was not a nation suffering under the strain of total war. This was a society so confident in its power that civilian life continued normally while their military conquered the Pacific. As they prepared to disembark, the 19 Japanese women faced an uncertain future. They had surrendered expecting death and found mercy. They had anticipated barbarism and encountered civilization. Everything they thought they knew about their enemy had been proven wrong in just 2 weeks aboard an American ship. The real education was about to begin. January 8, 1945. Angel Island Immigration Station, San Francisco Bay. The morning fog lifted slowly from the bay as the 19 Japanese women stepped onto American soil for the first time in their lives. The same facility that had processed thousands of Asian immigrants over the past 40 years now served as a specialized reception center for the war's most unusual prisoners. Yoshiko Tanaka clutched her small bundle of possessions as she walked down the gangplank, flanked by Women's Army Corps personnel who carried clipboards rather than rifles. The contrast struck her immediately. Instead of the military guards with bayonets she expected, her escorts were American women in clean uniforms who spoke quietly among themselves and occasionally smiled. Captain Dorothy Miller waited at the bottom of the gangplank, having flown to California specifically to oversee the transfer. She had spent months studying Japanese culture and language in preparation for this moment. Behind her stood a small group of civilian officials, representatives from the International Red Cross, the War Relocation Authority, and the Office of the Provost Marshal General. "Welcome to the United States," Captain Miller said in carefully pronounced Japanese. "You are prisoners of war under the protection of the Geneva Convention. You will be treated with dignity and respect during your time here." The processing took place in a building that had been hastily converted for this purpose. Each woman was photographed, fingerprinted, and assigned a prisoner number. But the procedures felt more like immigration processing than military detention. American officials explained each step, asked about dietary restrictions and medical needs, and provided translation services for those who spoke no English. Dr. Robert Yamamoto, a Japanese-American physician from San Francisco whose own family had been interned at Manzanar earlier in the war, conducted the medical examinations. His presence created another layer of confusion for the prisoners. Here was a man of Japanese ancestry serving as a doctor in the American military, treating Japanese prisoners with professional courtesy. "Your health is good considering your ordeal," Dr. Yamamoto told Yoshiko in Japanese. "The Americans want to ensure you receive proper medical care. If you have any problems, any pain or illness, you must tell the medical staff immediately." The temporary holding facility at Angel Island had been prepared with remarkable attention to detail. Each woman received a clean cot with sheets and blankets, a footlocker for personal belongings, and access to communal washing facilities with hot running water. The mess hall served both American and Asian foods, with rice available at every meal in attempts to accommodate Japanese preferences. But the most shocking discovery came on their third day when Captain Miller called them together for an orientation meeting. "You will soon be transferred to a permanent facility," she announced. "During your time there, you will be allowed to send and receive mail through the International Red Cross. You may write to your families once per week." The silence that followed was deafening. Telegraph operator Sachiko Yamamoto raised her hand tentatively. Captain Miller-san, "Our families, they will know we are alive." "Yes," Captain Miller replied. "The Red Cross has already notified the Japanese government through neutral channels that you are prisoners of war in American custody. Your families will be informed that you are safe." Senior nurse Kimiko Hayashi struggled to process this information. Her husband served somewhere in the Pacific with the Imperial Navy. Her parents lived near Hiroshima. For months, she had assumed they believed her dead. The possibility of communication seemed too miraculous to be real. "This is propaganda," whispered administrative clerk Midori Suzuki to her companions. "They want us to believe our families still live, to make us compliant." But the evidence surrounding them suggested otherwise. The American officials showed genuine concern for their welfare. The medical care exceeded anything they had received in the Japanese military. The food was abundant and nutritious. The living conditions were comfortable by any standard they had known. Dr. Sarah Goldman, the Jewish refugee who had befriended them aboard ship, visited regularly during their stay at Angel Island. She brought books, writing materials, and news of the outside world. Her presence continued to puzzle the prisoners, challenging their preconceptions about American society. "In Vienna, before the Nazis came, I was a professor of psychology," Dr. Goldman explained to a small group gathered in the recreation room. "When I came to America as a refugee, this country gave me a new life. Now I work to help other displaced people, including prisoners of war. This is what democracy means," the opportunity for everyone to contribute, regardless of their background. Yoshiko found herself drawn to these conversations. Her English, learned in school before the war, was improving rapidly through daily interaction with American personnel. She began to serve as an unofficial translator for the other women, a role that earned her additional privileges and responsibility. The transfer to their permanent location came 2 weeks later. They were loaded onto a standard passenger train, not a military transport or cattle car, but regular coaches with upholstered seats and large windows. The journey to their destination in Colorado would take 3 days, with stops for meals and exercise at designated stations along the route. As the train pulled away from San Francisco, the prisoners pressed their faces against the windows to watch America pass by. The landscape revealed a country at the height of its power, factories running at full capacity, with smoke rising from countless chimneys, freight trains loaded with materials moving in both directions, highways filled with civilian automobiles, and cities that blazed with electric lights even during daylight hours. The abundance was overwhelming. In every small town where the train stopped, they observed well-dressed civilians going about their daily business without apparent concern for the war raging across the Pacific. Children played in schoolyards, shops displayed goods in their windows, and parking lots were filled with private automobiles. This was not a nation straining under wartime sacrifice, but a society so prosperous that war production actually seemed to enhance rather than diminish civilian life. At a stop in Nevada, Yoshiko watched through the window as railroad workers unloaded mail bags from their train. Hundreds of letters and packages were being sorted for delivery to local addresses. The postal system continued to function normally, connecting families and communities across vast distances. In Japan, mail service had become increasingly unreliable as the war situation deteriorated. "They have so much," observed teacher Hanako Watanabe, who had volunteered for overseas service to educate Japanese children in occupied territories. "Food, electricity, transportation, communication. How can a nation fight a war and still maintain such abundance?" The train passed through farming communities where mechanized agriculture produced crops on a scale unimaginable in Japan. Single farms covered more land than entire Japanese villages, worked by tractors and harvesters that eliminated the need for human labor. Grain elevators stored harvests that could feed cities, and livestock operations raised cattle by the thousands. During meal stops, the prisoners observed American families eating in restaurants and diners. The portions were enormous by Japanese standards, with meat served at every meal and fresh vegetables available regardless of season. Children drank milk as casually as Japanese children drank tea, and adults consumed coffee and soft drinks in quantities that suggested unlimited supply. On their second night aboard the train, as they rolled through the Colorado Rockies, Kimiko Hayashi sat awake staring out at the darkened landscape. Occasionally, they passed isolated farmhouses with electric lights glowing in multiple windows. Even in these remote locations, American families enjoyed conveniences that were luxuries in Japanese cities. "I begin to understand," she wrote in a letter she planned to send to her husband if the promised mail service proved real. "America's strength comes not from their soldiers alone, but from their entire society. Every farmer, every factory worker, every family contributes to their war effort simply by living their normal lives. They have created abundance so complete that even total war cannot diminish it." As dawn broke over the Colorado plains, the train approached their destination, a newly constructed facility that would serve as their home for the duration of the war. The compound was larger than most Japanese towns, with dozens of buildings, electric lighting, and paved roads. Water towers and power lines indicated infrastructure that would support thousands of people. But the most remarkable sight was the flag flying over the main administration building. The American flag snapped in the morning breeze, its red, white, and blue colors bright against the clear Colorado sky. Below it flew another flag that none of the prisoners had expected to see. The flag of the International Red Cross, symbol of humanitarian protection under international law. Captain Miller met them at the station, having traveled ahead to ensure their reception was properly organized. "Welcome to your new home," she said simply. "Here you will have the opportunity to write to your families, to learn about American society, and to wait safely for the war's end." As they gathered their belongings and prepared to enter the compound, Sachiko Yamamoto turned to Yoshiko with tears in her eyes. Do you think it's true? About the letters? Will we really be able to write to our families? Yoshiko looked at the Red Cross flag flying above the administration building and thought about everything they had experienced since their surrender 6 weeks earlier. Every promise the Americans had made had been kept. Every threat they had feared had proven false. Every assumption about American cruelty had been replaced by evidence of American humanity. Yes, she said quietly. I think they mean what they say. The real test was about to begin. February 14th, 1945. Camp Carson, Colorado. The morning air was crisp and thin at 6,000 feet elevation as the 19 Japanese women gathered in the recreation hall for their weekly mail call. For 2 months, they had been writing letters to their families through the International Red Cross, carefully following the guidelines provided by camp administrators. Today, Captain Dorothy Miller entered the room carrying a canvas mail sack that would forever change their understanding of American intentions. Ladies, Captain Miller announced in her now fluent Japanese, today we have received the first responses to your letters. 18 letters have arrived through the Red Cross office in Geneva. The silence that followed was profound. Yoshiko Tanaka felt her heart pounding as she watched Captain Miller open the mail sack. After months of uncertainty, they were about to learn whether their families had survived the war's devastation, whether the American promise of mail delivery was genuine, and whether their own letters had actually reached home. Senior nurse Kimiko Hayashi approached the table where Captain Miller was sorting the letters. Each envelope bore official Red Cross markings and Japanese characters in familiar handwriting. Kimiko's hands trembled as she accepted an envelope addressed in her mother's distinctive script. The letter was postmarked from Hiroshima Prefecture, dated January 15, 1945. Kimiko tore it open carefully, afraid the paper might disintegrate at her touch. As she unfolded the rice paper and read the first lines, her composure cracked completely. My dearest daughter, her mother had written in formal characters. We received word through the Red Cross that you are alive and safe in America. When the official came to our village with this news, your father and I wept with joy. We had mourned you as lost when Saipan fell. To learn that you live is a miracle beyond our prayers. The letter continued with details of village life, the increasing food shortages, the young men who had been conscripted for service, the bombing raids that occasionally reached their area. But the tone remained hopeful, even grateful. We are proud that you serve with honor even in captivity. The Red Cross official told us that American treatment of prisoners follows international law. We pray daily for your safety and for the war's end. Around the room, similar scenes were unfolding. Telegraph operator Sachiko Yamamoto sobbed openly as she read news from her younger sister in Tokyo. The bombing is terrible, but we survive in the subway tunnels. Grandmother still tells stories of your cleverness with the radio equipment. She says the Americans must feed you well because you were always too thin. We have prepared a package to send through the Red Cross, dried fish and origami paper if the officials allow it. Administrative clerk Midori Suzuki received news from her husband, who had been wounded in the Philippines and invalid home. The doctors say I will recover, though I walk with difficulty now. Your letters describing America are like reading fairy tales. Is it true that every building has electric lights? That even prisoners eat meat daily? I share your words with other wounded soldiers. They find it hard to believe. The psychological impact was overwhelming. These letters proved that their families not only lived, but knew of their whereabouts and condition. More shocking still, the American government was facilitating regular communication with enemy civilians during active warfare. The letters had taken 6 weeks to travel from Japan to Geneva to Colorado, passing through multiple censorship boards and requiring cooperation between warring nations. Dr. Sarah Goldman observed the scene with professional fascination. In her confidential report to the War Department, she noted, the Japanese women's reaction to receiving mail suggests they had genuinely believed their families were either dead or would never learn of their fate. The letters appear to be the first concrete evidence they have received that normal human relationships can persist even during total war. The psychological effect is profound. Several women are experiencing what can only be described as emotional rebirth. The letters also revealed the war's progression from the perspective of Japanese civilians. The women learned that American bombing campaigns had intensified dramatically, that food rationing had become severe, and that civilian morale was declining. Yet, paradoxically, their own situation continued to improve steadily. They attended English classes taught by volunteer instructors from the University of Colorado. Professor Margaret Wong, a Chinese-American linguist who had fled Beijing before the Japanese invasion, spent 3 hours daily teaching basic English conversation and American history. Her presence created another layer of complexity in the prisoners' understanding of American society. In America, Professor Wong explained during one lesson, "We have people from many countries working together. Chinese like me, Japanese like you, Europeans, Africans, Native Americans. Our strength comes from this diversity, not from racial purity." The women worked in the camp hospital, earning 50 cents daily for their medical services. American doctors welcomed their expertise, particularly in treating tropical diseases that some prisoners had contracted in the Pacific Islands. Dr. Robert Chun, the camp physician and cousin of Lieutenant Chun who had processed them at Saipan, treated them as professional colleagues rather than prisoners. "Your medical training is excellent," Dr. Chun told Yoshiko as they examined a patient together. "Would you be interested in learning about American medical techniques? We have new treatments for infections, better surgical procedures, improved anesthesia." The contrast with conditions they had known in the Japanese military was stark. American medical supplies seemed unlimited: antibiotics, surgical instruments, X-ray equipment, laboratory facilities. They had access to medicines that had been unavailable to Japanese forces for years. When teacher Hanako Watanabe developed pneumonia during the harsh Colorado winter, she received penicillin, a wonder drug that most Japanese had only heard rumors about. As winter gave way to spring, the mail exchanges became routine, but no less meaningful. The women learned to navigate American postal regulations, to write within the prescribed limits on length and content, and to express themselves within the boundaries of military censorship. Their letters home became windows through which Japanese families glimpsed American society. Yoshiko's correspondence with her parents in Kyushu grew increasingly detailed. She described the abundance of food, the comfortable living conditions, the educational opportunities, and the respectful treatment they received from American personnel. Her father's responses revealed amazement at these descriptions. "Your account of eating fresh meat 3 times weekly seems impossible. Here we are fortunate to have meat once monthly. You write of electric lights in every room. We have not had electricity in our village since the bombing of the power station." The letters also facilitated an exchange of cultural information that transcended the war. American officials encouraged the prisoners to share Japanese customs and traditions, while providing them with American magazines, newspapers, and books. The women learned about American holidays, political systems, and social customs. They discovered that American women could vote, own property, and pursue professional careers, freedoms that seemed revolutionary to minds shaped by traditional Japanese society. In May 1945, Kimiko Hayashi received a letter that changed everything. Her mother wrote from a refugee center near Hiroshima. "The city has been bombed again, more terribly than before. A single bomb destroyed everything for miles. We escaped to the countryside, but tens of thousands died instantly. Yet, even in this devastation, the Red Cross workers found us and delivered your letters. Knowing you are safe gives us strength to continue." The atomic bombing of Hiroshima had been mentioned briefly in American newspapers available to the prisoners, but its significance hadn't fully registered until they read first-hand accounts from survivors. Kimiko's family had lived through humanity's first nuclear attack, yet the International Red Cross system had continued functioning even in such chaos. Captain Miller called a special meeting to address the prisoners' concerns about their families. "We understand this news is shocking and frightening," she said gently. "The Red Cross is working to confirm the safety of all your family members. We will continue to facilitate mail delivery regardless of what happens in the war." This promise seemed almost impossible to believe. America had just devastated Japanese cities with weapons of unprecedented power, yet American officials were personally ensuring that enemy prisoners could communicate with their families in the bombed areas. The contradiction challenged every assumption the women held about warfare, revenge, and human nature. When Japan's surrender came in August 1945, the prisoners' reactions were complex and conflicted. They felt relief that the killing would end, grief for their defeated homeland, and uncertainty about their future. But they also felt something unexpected: gratitude toward their captors and anxiety about leaving the safety they had found in American custody. The final letters of the war arrived in September. Yoshiko's parents wrote, "Japan has surrendered, and we will rebuild from the ashes. Your letters describing American democracy have given us hope for the future. You have seen what a peaceful, prosperous society can achieve. When you return, you must help us create something similar in Japan." As autumn approached and repatriation plans took shape, the 19 women faced an uncertain future. They had arrived as prisoners expecting death and found instead an education in the possibilities of human civilization. Through the simple act of receiving letters from home, they had witnessed America's most powerful weapon: the confidence to treat enemies with dignity, knowing that such treatment revealed strength rather than weakness. The mail call that had begun with 18 letters on Valentine's Day 1945 had become a bridge across an ocean of war, connecting enemies through the bonds of family love and proving that even in humanity's darkest hours, compassion could survive and flourish. March 1946. Camp Carson, Colorado. The final mail call came on a crisp morning when spring snow still dusted the Rocky Mountains. Captain Dorothy Miller entered the recreation hall carrying not a mail sack, but a single folder containing repatriation orders for the 19 Japanese women who had become both prisoners and witnesses to American democracy. "Ladies," she announced in Japanese that had become nearly fluent after 15 months of daily interaction, "ships are being prepared to return you to Japan. Your repatriation will begin within the month." The silence that greeted this announcement surprised even Captain Miller. She had expected relief, celebration, tears of joy at the prospect of going home. Instead, she found faces marked by uncertainty and, in some cases, reluctance to leave. Yoshiko Tanaka, now serving as the unofficial leader of the group and translator for more complex communications, raised her hand. "Captain Miller-san, what will happen to the letter program? Will our families still be able to write to us?" The question revealed the depth of transformation that had occurred during their captivity. For these women, mail delivery had become more than communication. It had become proof of human civilization's capacity to transcend war and hatred. The regular letters had sustained them through homesickness, cultural displacement, and the psychological challenge of reconciling everything they had been taught about America with everything they had experienced. Captain Miller had prepared for this moment. The Red Cross will continue facilitating mail between Japan and the United States. You will be able to correspond with American friends you have made here, if you choose. We hope these connections will continue after the war. Dr. Sarah Goldman, who had become both teacher and confidant to the prisoners, conducted the final interviews for her comprehensive study of prisoner rehabilitation. Her findings would influence American policies toward Japanese prisoners for years to come, though the full scope of her work remained classified until the 1970s. "You have been through an extraordinary experience," Dr. Goldman told the assembled women. "You have seen American society at close range during wartime. What will you tell your families and friends when you return home?" Senior nurse Kimiko Hayashi answered for the group. "We will tell them that America won this war not through hatred or cruelty, but through abundance and confidence. We will tell them that Americans treat even their enemies with dignity because they are secure in their own strength." The letters exchanged during the final months had revealed the extent of devastation in Japan. Cities lay in ruins, the economy had collapsed, millions were homeless and hungry. Yet the correspondence also showed remarkable resilience among Japanese civilians and growing curiosity about the American system that had produced such overwhelming victory. Sachiko Yamamoto's sister had written from Tokyo, "People speak constantly about America now. How did they build such powerful industries? How do they organize their society? Your letters describing American democracy are passed from family to family. Everyone wants to understand how a nation can be so prosperous and powerful yet still treat enemies kindly." The educational programs at Camp Carson had expanded dramatically in the final year of captivity. The women had studied American history, political science, economics, and social organization. They had attended lectures by university professors, participated in mock democratic elections, and learned about constitutional government. Most remarkably, they had witnessed American self-criticism, the open discussion of racial problems, economic inequalities, and political failures that would have been treasonous in wartime Japan. Professor Margaret Wong had become particularly influential in shaping their understanding. Her own story, fleeing Japanese invasion of China, finding refuge in America, contributing to the war effort while maintaining her cultural identity, illustrated possibilities they had never imagined. In her final lecture, she addressed questions that had puzzled the prisoners throughout their captivity. "You ask how America can be so diverse yet so unified," Professor Wong said. "The answer is that Americans are united not by blood or soil, but by ideas. We believe in democracy, opportunity, and individual rights. These beliefs are powerful enough to unite people from every nation on earth." The vocational training programs had prepared the women for return to a Japan that would need rebuilding from the ground up. They had learned about agricultural mechanization, industrial organization, hospital administration, and educational methods. American instructors had emphasized that Japan's reconstruction would require adopting modern techniques while preserving valuable cultural traditions. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, the camp commander, had made an unprecedented decision during the winter of 1945-46. He arranged for the women to send care packages to their families in Japan through the Red Cross, medical supplies, vitamins, and canned foods purchased with wages they had earned working in the camp hospital. Enemy prisoners sending aid to their defeated homeland represented a generosity that challenged every assumption about victory and vengeance. Yoshiko had used her savings to send antibiotics to her parents in Kyushu, where disease was spreading through overcrowded refugee camps. Her father's response captured the psychological impact of this gesture, that our daughter, held prisoner in America, can send medicine to heal Japanese wounds shows the character of our former enemies. They have defeated us completely, yet they show mercy. This is the behavior of a truly civilized people. The mail exchanges had created personal relationships that transcended the war. Several of the women had developed friendships with American families who had written to them as pen pals. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, a rancher's wife from nearby Colorado Springs, had corresponded regularly with teacher Hanako Watanabe, sharing stories of American family life and expressing interest in Japanese culture. "When you return to Japan," Mrs. Patterson had written, "please remember that Americans want friendship with the Japanese people. We fought against your government's policies, not against you personally. We hope our countries can be allies in building a peaceful world." Such sentiments appeared regularly in letters from American civilians who had learned about the prisoner program through church groups and community organizations. The response had been overwhelmingly positive, with thousands of Americans volunteering to correspond with Japanese prisoners or contribute to their welfare. Dr. Robert Chun conducted the final medical examinations before repatriation. His assessment documented remarkable improvements in the prisoners' health during their captivity. Despite the trauma of capture and displacement, all 19 women were healthier than when they had arrived. They had gained weight, recovered from tropical diseases, and received dental care that had corrected problems they had suffered for years. "Your medical records will accompany you to Japan," Dr. Chun explained. "American medical techniques you have learned here may help in treating patients in Japanese hospitals. We have prepared manuals describing new treatments for tuberculosis, surgical procedures, and disease prevention." The final weeks were spent in preparation for an uncertain future. Japan lay devastated, occupied by American forces, and struggling with fundamental questions about its political and social organization. The 19 women who had witnessed American democracy in operation would return as inadvertent ambassadors of democratic ideals. Captain Miller organized farewell ceremonies that honored both American and Japanese customs. The camp's American personnel presented gifts and letters of friendship to carry back to Japan. Local Colorado families who had befriended the prisoners through correspondence contributed packages of supplies and personal mementos. On March 15, 1946, the women boarded a train for San Francisco, retracing the journey that had brought them to Colorado 15 months earlier. The America they observed through the train windows was transforming from wartime to peacetime production, with factories retooling for civilian goods and millions of veterans returning to civilian life. At Angel Island, they underwent final processing before boarding the transport ship USS General M.C. Meigs for the journey to Japan. The ship carried not only repatriated prisoners, but also tons of relief supplies for Japanese civilians, medicine, food, clothing, and educational materials provided by American charity organizations. As the ship passed under the Golden Gate Bridge and entered the Pacific Ocean, Yoshiko stood at the rail looking back at the American coastline. In her final letter to Captain Miller, she wrote, "You showed us that even in total war, humanity can survive and flourish. We return to Japan not as defeated enemies, but as witnesses to what democratic civilization can achieve. Our children will grow up knowing that Americans are not demons, but people who choose kindness even when they could choose vengeance." The 19 Japanese women who had received letters from home while imprisoned in America became unwitting architects of reconciliation. Their testimony helped lay the groundwork for the remarkable transformation of Japanese-American relations in the post-war era. They had experienced America's secret weapon, the confidence to treat enemies with dignity, knowing that such treatment revealed the strength of democratic values. In the letters they carried home, their families had witnessed the same revelation. Through Red Cross mail delivery, ordinary Japanese civilians had seen proof that Americans distinguished between the Japanese government they had fought and the Japanese people they hoped to befriend. The letters had become bridges across an ocean of war, proving that even in humanity's darkest hours, connection and compassion could survive. The women returned to a Japan under American occupation, but their experience in American prison camps had prepared them for the democratic transformation that would follow. They had seen industrial efficiency, witnessed political freedom, and experienced social mobility. They knew that Reconstruction was possible because they